questions to ask, and a fire that won't die, unraveling each task under the sky. Oh, Digger 420, curious Canuck, answers on your mind, never getting stuck.
Because, you know. Oh, for Pete's sakes. Hi, everyone. Let me try that again. Oh, okay. So I'm actually, yeah, okay. Nothing else went wrong. Boo is being a pain in the butt. She all of a sudden needs attention. She's crying and stuff. I've got background noise kind of canceled out, so hopefully she won't annoy you too much. Sweets is getting annoyed because Boo just jumped all over her, and then I poured her back on top of Sweets. So, you know, it's a fun time in Diggerland this morning. They have eaten, you know, it's not that time for, you know, a couple hours, so should be okay, but they're just, yeah, they're just being extra feisty this morning. How about you guys? How are you all doing this morning? Thursday already? Don't you dare get on the counter. It's like she knows. Anyways, all of a sudden it was totally fine, calm, cool. Everyone was good to go until I hit live. And then suddenly the girls decided to do their stuff. So anyways, yes, Thursday morning, we're reading, we're learning more. Just a second. All right. Now she's going to be held for punishment while we say good morning because she's really pissing me off now. So John was here first. Hello, John. How you doing? Support the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. Thank you so much. Oh. No, you're not going to get away. Nope. You don't like it? Too bad. There we go. And then Brian says 1 minute till he gets to hear my digger. Hello, my digger. How you doing? I went into my own Rumble chat early so that I could drop a couple of Trump emotes, including his Trump flossing, which is really good. I enjoy that. I also have a warning, a disclaimer. I am not responsible for any messages or any emergencies that may happen during the reading of this or any other book. You can listen at your own risk. And that goes specifically to you, Brian. It's not my fault if something goes wrong in the lab today. You know better by now. If you listen and something goes wrong, it's on you. Good morning. I hear you got a stream deck or a sound board or, you know, technical things so you can have sound drops and whatnot. So you'll get to have some fun. Yes, Digger, I've been fixing my mic audio this morning. I think I may have improved it. Awesome possum. That's great, Brian. Hello, Alan. How you doing? Mwah. Right back at you. Aw, you're in a sad mood. You're blue. Aw. Well, you're here, so that's good. We are back and we are reading more of The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. I really am enjoying it. It's very interesting. looking at brain issues from the right hemisphere. It's I don't know. I also have to say, I keep saying lately, and I don't know why, but it's annoying me, so it must be annoying you guys. So yeah, I apologize in advance that I am working on it. Alan says I'm not blue. Oh, you're not. Oh, that's very strange. That's right, you are not blue. What on earth? I've got myself going in my ear. Where are you? Scrolly, scrolly. What do you mean you're not going to scroll further? I'm going to get it. There we go. There we go. Da, 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 da. That should be better. Try it again, my friend. I don't know why you weren't blue. I thought I'd put you on there. But there, that's all better. Because I would not want to miss out on you. There you go. See? Much better. Oh, and I did a few things so the computer has to catch up. I am going to minimize that. I'm going to put that in the corner. See if it... Nope, maybe. I don't know. See, I cleaned the damned thing out. I did. I'm keeping an eye on it and everything, but the my tech gremlins are still here. So it wasn't just that. I'm in a way I'm glad, because that would be really awful if all this time all my problems were just because there was a cat living in my tower. That would have been really embarrassing. So in a way, I'm glad that there's still tech gremlins, but on the other hand, there's still tech gremlins, and I don't know why it's got me doing the herky jerky. But what can you do? So it says there's only 2 of you in here. I don't think that's right, though. There's a few of you guys that usually come in for this read in particular. And I don't want to start reading just before everyone shows up. Let's see. Yeah, see? That makes sense. Yep. Okay. So there is more. It's just it's StreamYard, so maybe that's why my camera's all herky-jerky too. Alan says, so all this time in my AM mornings, you didn't see I'm black and white. Well, I didn't even notice. I don't pay attention to that sort of stuff. I thought I got all of you in a big swath, but apparently not. And I'm so sorry. That's, pardon me. Yeah, that's not right. I don't pay attention to that sort of thing. Honestly, I didn't notice. Which is very weird because I like the color blue. Blue's my favorite color, so I don't know why I didn't realize that you're still in black, but we've got it rectified. So there you go. Anyways, today it's a reading day. We're going to have fun, or at least I'm going to have fun. Thank you, hon. We're going to have fun today. We're still in the first section of the book, which is losses. Last week we read chapters 3 and 4, the man who fell out of the bed. Right, okay. So we had the woman who didn't actually have any ability to control her body unless she was physically like looking at her body to make it work. Otherwise it was like the rest of her body didn't even exist. So she had to relearn how to function, how to walk and talk and everything in a body that wasn't communicating with her brain subconsciously like it normally would, like it does for all of us. So she had to relearn everything, which was quite impressive. And then the second, like I said, was oops, no. There we go. This next, yeah, the next chapter that I read was The Man Who Fell Out of Bed. He was the one, well, there was a couple of people that were mentioned, woke up suddenly not recognizing their own limb as their limb. The one man thought someone, he woke up and he thought someone had played a prank on him. He was a med student and he thought someone had played a prank on him and put a disgusting, rotting leg in the bed with him. But then he realized, well, where's my leg? And that's when he really freaked out. Turns out suddenly, for whatever reason, in both cases, they were not recognizing their own limb. It was someone else's or not there at all. It was quite strange. I've heard of the phantom limb where you have like a arm or a leg amputated, but you can still feel that limb after it's been long gone. But it's, it's a little bit, well, it's the exact opposite where you can't feel it at all. You can see it, but you don't feel it and you can't recognize it as your own. It's pretty intense. You actually did fall out of your bed yesterday with the hangover. Okay. I thought I was getting out the other side, but nope. That'll happen from time to time when you've been drinking. That's awesome. So anyways, we've got today, I figure because they look much shorter, we'll probably get 2 chapters read. Let me get this water over here. I'm trying to drink a lot more water and a lot less coffee. So bear with me if I seem a little bit, I guess, less than animated today. I'm doing things a little different. 3, please. Yeah. So we'll do chapters 5 and 6 today. We're still looking at losses, so we'll see what kind of loss there is today. So chapter 5 is called Hands. Hi, MJ. How you doing? Good to see you. Madeline J. was admitted to the St. Benedict's Hospital near New York City in 1980, her 60th year. A congenitally blind woman with cerebral palsy who had been looked after by her family at home throughout her life. Given this history and her pathetic condition with spasticity and athetosis, i.e. involuntary movements of both hands, to which was added a failure of the eyes to develop, I expected to find her both retarded and regressed. She was neither. Quite the contrary. She spoke freely, indeed eloquently. Her speech, mercifully, was scarcely affected by a spasticity, revealing herself to be a high-spirited woman of exceptional intelligence and literacy. You've read a tremendous amount, I said. You must be really at home with the Braille. No, I'm not, she said. All my reading has been done for me by talking books or other people. I can't read Braille, not a single word. I can't do anything with my hands. They are completely useless. She held them up derisively. Useless, God-forsaken lumps of dough. They don't even feel a part of me. I found this very startling. The hands are not usually affected by cerebral palsy, at least not essentially affected. They may be somewhat spastic or weak or deformed, but are generally of considerable use, unlike the legs, which may be completely paralyzed, in that variant called Little's disease or cerebral dysplasia. Miss J's hands were mildly spastic and athetotic, but her sensory capacities, as I now rapidly determined, were completely intact. She immediately and correctly identified light touch, pain, temperature, passive movement of the fingers. There was no impairment of elementary sensation as such, but in dramatic contrast, there was the profoundest impairment of perception. She could not recognize or identify anything whatever. I placed all sorts of objects in her hands, including one of my own hands. She could not identify, and she did not explore. There were no active interrogatory movements of her hands. They were indeed as inactive, as inert, and as useless as lumps of dough. This is very strange, I said to myself. How can one make sense of all this? There is no gross sensory deficit. Her hands would seem to have the potential of being perfectly good hands, and yet they were not. Can it be that they are functionless or useless because she has never used them? Had being protected and looked after, babied since birth, prevented her from the normal exploratory use of the hands which all infants learn in the first months of life? Had she been carried about, had everything done for her in a manner that had prevented her from developing a normal pair of hands? And if this was the case, which seemed far-fetched, but was the only hypothesis I could think of, could she now, in her 60th year, acquire what she should have acquired in the first weeks and months of life? Was there any precedent? Had anything like this ever been described or tried? I did not know, but I immediately thought of a possible parallel. What was described by Leontev and Zaporozets in their book, Rehabilitation of Hand Function. The condition they were describing was quite different in origin. They described a similar alienation of the hands in some sort. They described a similar alienation of the hands in some 200 soldiers following massive injury and surgery. The injured hands felt foreign, lifeless, and useless, or stuck on, despite elementary neurological and sensory intactness. Leontev and Zaporozets spoke of how the Gnostic systems that allow gnosis, or perceptive use of the hands, to take place could be disassociated in such cases as a consequence of injury, surgery, and the weeks or months long hiatus in the use of the hands that followed. In Madeline's case, although the phenomenon was identical, the uselessness, lifelessness, alienation, it was lifelong. She did not need just to recover her hands, but to discover them, to acquire them, and to achieve them for the first time, not just to regain a disassociated Gnostic system, but to construct a Gnostic system she had never had in the first place. Was this possible? The injured soldiers described by Leontev and Zaporozets had normal hands before injury. All they had to do was to remember what had been forgotten, or disassociated, or inactivated through severe injury. Madeline, in contrast, had no repertoire of memory, for she had never used her hands. And she felt she had no hands, or arms either. She had never fed herself, used the toilet by herself, or reached out to help herself, always leaving it for others to help her. She had behaved for 60 years as if she were a being without hands. This then was the challenge that faced us. A patient with perfect elementary sensations in the hands, but apparently no power to integrate these sensations to the level of perceptions that were related to the world and to herself. No power to say, I perceive, I recognize, I will, I act, so far as her useless hands went. But somehow or other, as Leontev and Zaporozets found with their patients, we had to get her to act and to use her hands actively, and we hoped, in so doing, to achieve integration. The integration is in the action, as Roy Campbell said. Madeline was agreeable to all this, indeed fascinated, but puzzled and not hopeful. How can I do anything with my hands, she asked, when they're just lumps of putty? In the beginning is the deed, Goethe writes. This may be so when we face moral or existential dilemmas, but not where movement and perception have their origin. Yet here too, there's always something sudden, a first step or a first word, as when Helen Keller said water, a first movement, a first perception, a first impulse, total out of the blue, where there was nothing or nothing was sensed before. In the beginning is the impulse, not a deed, not a reflex, but an impulse, which is both more obvious and more mysterious than either. We could not say to Madeline, do it, but we might hope for an impulse. We might hope for, we might solicit, we might even provoke one. I thought of the infant as it reached for the breast. Leave Madeline her food, as if by accident, slightly out of reach on occasion. I suggested to the nurses, don't starve her, don't tease her, but show less than your usual alacrity in feeding her. And one day it happened, what had never happened before. Impatient, hungry, instead of waiting passively and patiently, she reached out an arm, groped, found a bagel, and took it to her mouth. This was the first use of her hands, her first manual act in 60 years, and it marked her birth as a motor individual, Sherrington's term for a person who emerges through acts. It also marked her first manual perception, and thus her birth as a complete perceptual individual. Her first perception, her first recognition was of a bagel, or bagelhood, as Helen Keller's first recognition, first utterance was of water, or waterhood. After this first act, this first perception, progress was extremely rapid. As she had reached out to explore or touch a bagel, so now, in her new hunger, she reached out to explore or touch the whole world. Eating led the way, the feeling, the exploring of different foods, containers, implements. Recognition had somehow to be achieved by a curiously roundabout sort of inference or guesswork. For having been both blind and handless since birth, she was lacking in the simplest internal images, whereas Helen Keller at least had tactile images. Had she not been of exceptional intelligence and literacy, with an imagination filled and sustained, so to speak, by the images of others, images conveyed by language, by the word, she might have remained almost as helpless as a baby. A bagel was recognized as round bread, with a hole in it. A fork was an elongated flat object with several sharp tines. But then this preliminary analysis gave way to an immediate intuition, and objects were instantly recognized as themselves, as immediately familiar in character and physiognomy, were immediately recognized as unique, as old friends. And this sort of recognition, not analytic but synthetic and immediate, went with a vivid delight and a sense that she was discovering a world full of enchantment, mystery, and beauty. The commonest objects delighted her and stimulated the desire to reproduce them. She asked for clay and started to make models. Her first model, her first sculpture, was of a shoehorn, and even this was somehow imbued with a peculiar power and humor, with flowing, powerful, chunky curves reminiscent of an early Henry Moore. And then, and this was within a month of her first recognitions, her attention, her appreciation moved from objects to people. There were limits, after all, to the interest and expressive possibilities of things, even when transfigured by the sort of innocent, ingenious, and often comical genius. Now she needed to explore the human face and figure, at rest and in motion. To be felt by Madeline was a remarkable experience. Her hands, only such a little while ago inert, doughy, now seemed charged with preternatural animation and sensibility. One was not merely being recognized, being scrutinized, in a way more intense and searching than any visual scrutiny, but being tasted and appreciated meditatively, imaginatively, and aesthetically by a born or a newborn artist. They were, one felt, not just the hands of a blind woman exploring, but of a blind artist, a meditative and creative mind, just open to the full sensuous and spiritual reality of the world. These explorations, too, pressed for representation and reproduction as an external reality. She started to model heads and figures, and within a year was locally famous as the blind sculptress of St. Benedict's. Her sculptures tended to be half or three-quarters life-size, with simple but recognizable features, and with a remarkably expressive energy. For me, for her, and for all of us, this was a deeply moving and amazing, almost a miraculous experience. Who would have dreamed, pardon me, who would have dreamed that basic powers of perception, normally acquired in the first months of life, but failing to be acquired at this time, could be acquired in one's 60th year? What wonderful possibilities of late learning and learning for the handicapped this opened up. And who could have dreamed that in this blind, palsied woman, hidden away, inactivated, and overprotected from all her life, there lay the germ of an astonishing artistic sensibility, unsuspected by her as by others, that would germinate and blossom into a rare and beautiful reality after remaining dormant and blighted for 60 years. This is the postscript. The case of Madeline J., however, as I was to find, was by no means unique. Within a year, I had encountered another patient, Simon K., who also had cerebral palsy combined with profound impairment of vision. While Mr. K. had normal strength and sensation in his hands, he scarcely ever used them, and was extraordinarily inept at handling, exploring, or recognizing anything. Now, we had been alerted by Madeline J. We wondered whether he too might not have a similar developmental agnosia, and as such, be treatable in the same way. And indeed, we soon found that what had been achieved with Madeline could be achieved with Simon as well. Within a year, he had become very handy in all ways, and particularly enjoyed simple carpentry, shaping plywood and wooden blocks and assembling them into simple wooden toys. He had no impulse to sculpt, to make reproductions. He was not a natural artist like Madeline, but still, after half a century spent virtually without hands, he enjoyed their use in all sorts of ways. This is the more remarkable, perhaps, because he is mildly retarded, an amiable simpleton, in contrast to the passionate and highly gifted Madeline J. It might be said that she is extraordinary, a Helen Keller, a woman in a million. But nothing like this could possibly be said for simple Simon. And yet the essential achievement, the achievement of hands, proved wholly as possible for him as for her. It seems clear that intelligence, and as such, plays no part in the matter, that the sole and essential thing is use. Such cases of developmental agnosia may be rare, but one commonly sees cases of acquired agnosia, which illustrate the same fundamental principle of use. Thus, I frequently see patients with severe glove and stocking neuropathy, so-called due to diabetes. If the neuropathy is sufficiently severe, patients go beyond feelings of numbness, the glove and stocking feeling, to a feeling of complete nothingness or derealization. They may feel, as one patient put it, like a basket case, with hands and feet completely missing. Sometimes they feel their arms and legs end in stumps, with lumps of dough or plaster somehow stuck on. Typically, this feeling of derealization, if it occurs, is absolutely sudden, and the return of reality, if it occurs, is equally sudden. There is, as it were, a critical, a functional, and ontological threshold. It is crucial to get such patients to use their hands and feet, even if necessary. Sorry. Sorry about that. I literally, all I've done is boil water in pots on the stovetop, and yet she's hell bent on getting up there for something. My apologies. All right, we'll go from here. It is crucial to get such patients to use their hands and feet, even if necessary, to trick them into so doing. With this, there is apt to occur a sudden realization, a sudden leap back into subjective reality in life, provided there is sufficient physiological potential. If the neuropathy is total, if the distal parts of the nerves are quite dead, no such realization is possible. Hello, AP. How you doing? Hello, Rusty. Good to see you too. For patients with a severe but subtotal neuropathy, a modicum of use is literally vital and makes all the difference between being a basket case and reasonably functional. With excessive use, there may be fatigue of the limited nerve function and sudden derealization again. It should be added that these subjective feelings have precise objective correlates. One finds electrical silence locally in the muscles of the hands and feet, and on the sensory side, a complete absence of any evoked potentials at every level up to the sensory cortex. As soon as the hands and feet are realized with use, there is a complete reversal of the physiological picture. A similar feeling of deadness and unrealness described in chapter 3, The Disembodied Lady. It's who I was talking about. She just suddenly lost all feeling, all ability to communicate with the rest of her body, unless she physically looked at the part of her body that she wanted to work. It was very, I don't know. To me, that seems very scary. Just suddenly you can't just, like, we breathe just subconsciously, and I'm talking and my hands are doing my French speaking with my hands thing, and that's subconsciously, and to not be able to do that, to suddenly not be able to have that subconscious control of your entire body is very scary. All right, now we are on chapter 6, called Phantoms. Who isn't mildly? You don't have the Sugarfoot. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and hello, Dom. How you doing? Thank you so much. All right, chapter 6, Phantoms. A phantom, in the sense that neurologists use, is a persistent image or memory of part of the body, usually a limb, for months or years after its loss. That's what I was saying. Known in antiquity, phantoms were described and explored in great detail by the great American neurologist Silas Weir Mitchell during and following the Civil War. No, she was able to, her internal organs that kept the body running continued to run subconsciously, but anything moving her arms or her legs, her fingers, sitting up or turning heads, anything like that was just gone. So that was last week, if you want. Yeah, I think you were handling another mini. No, you got called into a meeting. So that's why you didn't have the emergency. So maybe go back and listen to it at home, not at work. So yeah, so now phantoms, that's what I was talking about at the beginning of the stream. What we were just reading about was the exact opposite of what I'd heard of, which are these phantoms. Anyway, here we go. Where Mitchell described several sorts of phantom, some strangely ghost-like and unreal. These were the ones he called sensory ghosts. Some compellingly and even dangerously lifelike and real. Some intensely painful, and others, or most, quite painless. Some photographically exact, like replicas or facsimiles of a lost limb. Others grotesquely foreshortened and distorted, as well as negative phantoms or phantoms of absence. He also indicated clearly that such body image disorders, the term was only introduced by Henry Head 50 years later, might be influenced by either central factors like stimulation or damage to the sensory cortex, especially that of parietal lobes, or peripheral ones, the condition of the nerve stump or neuromas, nerve damage, nerve block, or nerve stimulation, disturbances in the spinal nerve roots or sensory tracts in the cord. I have been particularly interested myself in these peripheral determinants. The following pieces, extremely short, almost anecdotal, were first published in the Clinical Curio section of the British Medical Journal. Phantom finger. A sailor accidentally cut off his right index finger. For 40 years afterwards, he was plagued by an intrusive phantom of the finger rigidly extended, as it was when cut off. Whenever he moved his hands towards his face, for example, to eat or scratch his nose, he was afraid that his phantom finger would poke his eye out. He knew this to be impossible, but the feeling was irresistible. He then developed severe sensory diabetic neuropathy and lost all sensation of even having any fingers. The phantom finger disappeared too. It is well known that a central pathological disorder, such as a sensory stroke, can cure a phantom. How often does a peripheral pathological disorder have the same effect? Disappearing phantom limbs. All amputees and all who work with them know that a phantom limb is essential if an artificial limb is to be used. Dr. Michael Kremer writes, "Its value to the amputee is enormous. I am quite certain that no amputee with an artificial lower limb can walk on it satisfactorily until the body image, in other words, the phantom, is incorporated into it. Thus, the disappearance of a phantom may be disastrous, and its recovery, its reanimation, a matter of urgency. This may be effected in all sorts of ways. Where Mitchell describes how, with Faradayization of the brachial plexus, a phantom hand missing for 25 years was suddenly resurrected. One such patient under my care describes how he must wake up his phantom in the mornings. First, he flexes the thigh stump towards him, and then he slaps it sharply, like a baby's bottom, several times. On the 5th or 6th slap, the phantom suddenly shoots forth, rekindled, fulgurated by the peripheral stimulus. Only then can he put on his prosthesis and walk. What other odd methods, one wonders, are used by amputees? Positional phantoms. A patient, Charles D., was referred to us for stumbling, falls, and vertigo. There had been unfounded suspicions of labyrinthine disorder. It was evident on closer questioning that what he experienced was not vertigo at all, but a flutter of ever-changing positional illusions. Suddenly the floor seemed further, then suddenly nearer. It pitched, it jerked, it tilted. In his own words, like a ship in heavy seas. In consequence, he found himself lurching and pitching unless he looked down at his feet. Vision was necessary to show him the true position of his feet and the floor. Feel had become grossly unstable and misleading. But sometimes even vision was overwhelmed by feel, so that the floor and his feet looked frightening and shifting. We soon ascertained that he was suffering from the acute onset of TAVES, and, in consequence of dorsal root involvement, from a sort of sensory delirium of rapidly fluctuating proprioceptive illusions. Everyone is familiar with the classical end stages of TAVES, in which there may be virtual proprioceptive blindness for the legs. Have readers encountered this intermediate stage of positional phantoms or illusions due to an acute and reversible tabetic delirium? The experience this patient recounts reminds me of a singular experience of my own occurring with the recovery from a proprioceptive scotoma. This I described in A Leg to Stand On as follows. I was infinitely unsteady and had to gaze down. There and then I perceived the source of the commotion. The source was my leg, or rather, that thing, that featureless cylinder of chalk which served as my leg, that chalky white abstraction of a leg. Now the cylinder was 1,000 feet long, now a matter of 2 millimeters. Now it was fat, now it was thin, now it was tilted this way, now tilted that. It was constantly changing in size and shape, in position and angle, the changes occurring 4 or 5 times a second. The extent of the transformation and change was immense. There could be 1,000-fold switches between successive frames. And then now we're reading Phantoms, Dead or Alive. There is often a certain confusion about phantoms, whether they should occur or not, whether they are pathological or not, whether they are real or not. The literature is confusing, but patients are not. They clarify matters by describing different sorts of phantoms. Thus, a clear-headed man with an above-the-knee amputation described this to me. There's this thing, this ghost foot, which sometimes hurts like hell, and the toes curl up or go into spasm. This is worst at night with the prosthetic off, or when I'm not doing anything. It goes away when I strap the prosthetic on and walk. I still feel the leg then, vividly, but it's a good phantom. It's different. It animates the prosthetic and allows me to walk. With this patient, as with all patients, it is not use all important in dispelling a bad or a passive or pathological phantom. If it exists, and keeping the good phantom, that is, the persisting personal limb memory or limb image, alive, active, and well, as they need. This is the postscript. Many, but not all patients with phantoms suffer phantom pain, or pain in the phantom. Sometimes this has a bizarre quality, but often it is rather ordinary pain. The persistence of a pain previously present in the limb, or the onset of a pain that might be expected were the limb actually present. I have, since the original publication of this book, received many fascinating letters from patients about this. One such patient speaks of the discomfort of an ingrown toenail which had not been taken care of before amputation, persisting for years after the amputation, but also of entirely different pain, an excruciating root pain or sciatica in the phantom, following an acute slipped disc, and disappearing with the removal of the disc and spinal fusion. Such problems, not at all uncommon, are in no sense imaginary, and may indeed be investigated by water. Sorry. Such problems, not at all uncommon, are in no sense imaginary, and may indeed be investigated by neuropsychological means. Thus, Dr. Jonathan Cole, a former student of mine and now a spinal neuropsychologist, describes how in a woman with persistent phantom leg pain. Anesthesia of the spinous ligament and with lidocaine caused the phantom to be anesthetized, indeed to disappear briefly. But that electrical stimulation of the spinal roots produced a sharp tingling pain in the phantom quite different from the dull one which was usually present. Whilst stimulation of the spinal cord higher up reduced the phantom pain, the personal communication, Dr. Cole had also presented detailed electrophysiological studies of a patient with a sensory polyneuropathy of 14 years duration, very similar in many respects to Christina, the disembodied lady. He tells the story of this patient in his book, Pride and a Daily Marathon. We're doing really good. I'm on chapter 7 now. Chapter 7, On the Level. It is 9 years now since I met Mr. McGregor in the neurology clinic at St. Dunstan's, an old people's home where I once worked. But I remember him. I see him as if it were yesterday. What's the problem? I asked as he tilted in. Problem? No problem. None that I know of. But others keep telling me I lean to the side. You're like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, they say. A bit more tilt and you'll topple right over. But you don't feel any tilt? I feel fine. I don't know what they mean. How could I be tilted without knowing I was? It sounds a queer business, I agreed. Let's have a look. I'd like you to stand and take a little stroll, just from here to that wall and back. I want to see for myself. And I want you to see too. We'll take a videotape of you walking and play it right back. Suits me, Doc, he said, and after a couple of lunges, stood up. What a fine old chap, I thought. 93, and he doesn't look a day past 70. Alert, bright as a button. Good for 100. And strong as a coal heaver, even if he does have Parkinson's disease. He was walking now, confidently, swiftly, but canted over, improbably. A good 20 degrees, his center of gravity way off to the left, maintaining his balance by the narrowest possible margin. There, he said with a pleased smile. See? No problems. I walked straight as a die. Did you indeed, Mr. McGregor? I asked. I want you to judge for yourself. I rewound the tape and played it back. He was profoundly shocked when he saw himself on the screen. His eyes bulged, his jaw dropped, and he muttered, I'll be damned. And then, they're right. I am over to one side. I see it here clear enough, but I've no sense of it. I don't feel it. That's it, I said. That's the heart of the problem. We have 5 senses in which we glory and which we recognize and celebrate, senses that constitute the sensible world for us. But there are other senses, secret senses, sixth senses, if you will, equally vital but unrecognized and unlauded. These senses, unconscious, automatic, had to be discovered. Historically, indeed, their discovery came late. What the Victorians vaguely called muscle sense, the awareness of the relative position of trunk and limbs, derived from receptors in the joints and tendons, was only really defined and named proprioception in the 1890s. And the complex mechanisms and controls by which our bodies are properly aligned and balanced in space, these have only been defined in our own century and still hold many mysteries. Perhaps it will only be in this space age, with the paradoxical license and hazards of gravity-free life, that we will truly appreciate our inner ears, our vestibules, and all the other obscure receptors and reflexes that govern our body orientation. For a normal man, in normal situations, they simply don't exist. Yet their absence can be quite conspicuous. If there is defective or distorted sensation in our overlooked secret senses, what we then experience is profoundly strange, an almost incommunicable equivalent to being blind or deaf. If proprioception is completely knocked out, the body becomes, so to speak, blind and deaf to itself. And, as the meaning of the Latin root proprius hints, ceases to own itself, to feel itself as itself. Again, see the disembodied lady. The old man suddenly became intent, his brows knitted, his lips pursed. He stood motionless, deep in thought, presenting the picture that I love to see, a patient in the actual moment of discovery, half appalled, half amused, seeing for the first time exactly what is wrong, and in the same moment, exactly what there is to be done. This is the therapeutic moment. Let me think, he muttered, half to himself, drawing his shaggy white brows down over his eyes and emphasizing each point with his powerful, gnarled hands. Let me think. You think with me, there must be an answer. I tilt to one side and I can't tell it, right? There should be some feeling, a clear signal, but it's not there, right? He paused. I used to be a carpenter, he said, his face lighting up. We would always use a spirit level to tell whether a surface was level or not, or whether it was tilted from vertical or not. Is there a sort of spirit level in the brain? I nodded. Can it be knocked out by Parkinson's disease? I nodded again. Is this what's happened to me? I nodded a third time and said yes, yes, and yes. In speaking of such a spirit level, Mr. McGregor had hit on a fundamental analogy, a metaphor for an essential control system in the brain. Parts of the inner ear are indeed physically and literally like levels. The labyrinth consists of semicircular canals containing liquid whose motion is continually monitored. But it was not these as such that were essentially at fault. Rather, it was his ability to use his balance organs in conjunction with the body's sense of itself and with its visual picture of the world. Mr. McGregor's homely symbol applies not just to the labyrinth, but also to the complex integration of the three secret senses: the labyrinthine, the proprioceptive, and the visual. It is this synthesis that is impaired in Parkinsonism. The most profound and most practical studies of such integrations and of their singular disintegrations in Parkinsonism were made by James Purdon Martin and are to be found in his remarkable book, The Basal Ganglia and Posture. It was originally published in 1967, but continually revised and expanded in the ensuing years. He is just completing the new edition when he died recently. Speaking of this integration, this integrator in the brain, Purdon Martin writes, there must be some center or a higher authority in the brain, some controller, we may say. This controller or higher authority must be informed of the state of stability or instability of the body. In the section on tilting reactions, Purdon Martin emphasizes the threefold contribution to the maintenance of a stable and upright posture, and he notes how commonly its subtle balance is upset in Parkinsonism. How, in particular, it is usual for the labyrinthine element to be lost before the proprioceptive and the visual. This triple control system, he implies, is such that one sense, one control, can compensate for the others. Not wholly, since the senses differ in their capabilities, but in part at least, and to a useful degree. Visual reflexes and controls are perhaps the least important, normally. So long as our vestibular and proprioceptive systems are intact, we are perfectly stable with their eyes closed. We do not tilt or lean or fall over the moment we close our eyes. But the precariously balanced Parkinsonian may do so. One often sees Parkinsonian patients sitting in the most grossly tilted positions with no awareness that this is the case. But let a mirror be provided so they can see their positions and they instantly straighten up. Proprioception, to a considerable extent, can compensate for defects in the inner ears. Thus, patients who have been surgically deprived of their labyrinths, as is sometimes done to relieve the intolerable crippling vertigo of severe Meniere's disease. While at first unable to stand upright or to take a single step, may learn to employ and to enhance their proprioception quite wonderfully. In particular, to use the sensors in the vast latissimus dorsi muscles of the back. The greatest, most mobile, yes, sorry. AP says, my inner ears are perfect structurally. Same with my other senses, save for the area of my brain eaten by my immune system. Interesting. So it's your immune system that is causing the lesions on the brain? Meniere's disease, what is that? It's actually Meniere's. It's French. Let's see. Meniere. Okay. So the can I make it do? No, I can't. I have to go and do it. I cannot add the French accents. Oh, you were just joking anyway. But there you go. The first accent goes that way on the first D, and then the second accent goes that way on the second D. There you go. All right, let's try that again. There's a lot of alliteration suddenly happening. I have to go all the way. Okay. Thus, patients who have been surgically deprived of their labyrinths, as is sometimes done to relieve the intolerable, crippling vertigo of severe Meniere's disease, while at first unable to stand upright or take a single step, may learn to employ and to enhance their proprioception quite wonderfully. In particular, to use the sensors in the vast latissimus dorsi muscles of the back, the greatest, most mobile muscular expanse of the body, as an accessory and novel balance organ, a pair of vast wing-like proprioceptors. As the patients become practiced, as this becomes second nature, they are able to stand and walk, not perfectly, but with safety, assurance, and ease. Purdon Martin was endlessly thoughtful and ingenious in designing a variety of mechanisms and methods that made it possible for even severely disabled Parkinsonians to achieve an artificial normality of gait and posture. Lines painted on the floor, counterweights in the belt, loudly ticking pacemakers to set the cadence for walking. In this, he always learned from his patients, to whom, indeed, his great book is dedicated. He was a deeply human pioneer, and in his medicine, understanding and collaborating were central. Patient and physician were co-equals on the same level, each learning from and helping the other, and between them arriving at new insights and treatments. But he had not, to my knowledge, devised a prosthesis for the correction of impaired tilting and higher vestibular reflexes, the problem that afflicted Mr. McGregor. The French are also responsible for discovering MS, just another reason to dislike them. Well, they didn't create it, they just gave it a name. It was already there. I've got some French ancestry, so don't hate us all, please. My Viking ancestors came from Norway, stopped off in France for a while, and then came across through America and into Canada. So there is a little bit of French in me. My apologies. So that's it, is it? Asked McGregor. I can't use the spirit level inside my head. I can't use my ears, but I can use my eyes. Yeah, there's no prosthesis for nerves. I know, right? Quizzically, experimentally, he tilted his head to one side. Things look the same now. The world doesn't tilt. Then he asked for a mirror, and I had a long one wheeled before him. Now I see myself tilting, he said. Now I can straighten up. Maybe I could stay straight, but I can't live among mirrors or carry one around with me. He thought again deeply, frowning in concentration. Then suddenly his face cleared and lit up with a smile. I've got it, he exclaimed. Yeah, Doc, I've got it. I don't need a mirror. I just need a level. I can't use the spirit levels inside my head, but why couldn't I use levels outside my head? Levels I could see, I could use with my eyes. That's what I was thinking. Get a string, tie a coin or something heavier at one end, and then he can just pull it out of his pocket and find out. You're the same old family French in my ancestry, but I don't recognize them. Okay, fair enough. Okay. He took off his glasses, fingering them thoughtfully, his smile slowly broadening. Here, for example, is the rim of my glasses. This could tell my eyes if I was tilting. I'd keep an eye on it at first. It would be a real strain, but then it might become second nature, automatic. Okay, Doc, so what do you think? I think it's a brilliant idea, Mr. McGregor. Let's give it a try. The principle was clear, the mechanism's a bit tricky. We first experimented with a sort of pendulum, a weighted thread hung from the rims, but this was too close to the eyes and scarcely seen at all. Then, with the help of our optometrist in workshop, we made a clip extending 2 nose lengths forward from the bridge of the spectacles, with a miniature horizontal level fixed to each side. We fiddled with various designs, all tested and modified by Mr. McGregor. In a couple of weeks, we had completed a prototype, a pair of somewhat Keith Robinson-ish spirit spectacles. The world's first pair, said Mr. McGregor in glee and triumph. He donned them. They looked a bit cumbersome and odd, but scarcely more so than the bulky hearing aid spectacles that were coming in at the time. And now a strange sight was to be seen in our home. Mr. McGregor in the spirit spectacles he had invented and made, his gaze intently fixed, like a steersman eyeing the binnacle of his ship. This worked in a fashion. At least he stopped tilting. But it was a continuous, exhausting exercise. And then, over the ensuing weeks, it got easier and easier. Keeping an eye on his instruments became unconscious, like keeping an eye on an instrument panel of one's own car while being free to think, chat, and do other things. Mr. McGregor's spectacles became the rage at St. Dunstan's. We had several other patients with Parkinsonianism who also suffered from impairment of tilting reactions and postural reflexes, a problem not only hazardous, but also notoriously resistant to treatment. Soon, a second patient, and then a third, were wearing Mr. McGregor's spirit spectacles, and now, like him, could walk upright and on the level. That's really cool. All right, well, that's pretty good. We've read a few chapters. We've been going for an hour, so I will leave you kids on that. We will come back next week for chapter 8, called Eyes Right. But until that time, that was a little bit more not that it was more interesting. It was more entertaining, a little bit less fascinating, but definitely more entertaining way to go about it. I've never heard of a spirit spectacle, but that makes a whole lot of sense. So yeah, it's interesting just what a person can come up with when they're facing an illness or an injury that they have to overcome. You may not be able to cure the thing, but you can find ways to make functioning with it easier. There are things that can be done. Like other senses taking over when one is gone. there are other things that can be done, and that gives me hope for, all of us. Maybe I'll find a neat mental trick in the book here so that I can get my memory back, so I don't have to stumble over words I know and mix up facts from different movies into the same movie and stuff like that. You never know. You never can tell. But in the meantime, I thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. It's been a lot of fun. And let me turn that one off. There we go. So today is Thursday morning, which means next time I see you, I will be seeing you on Shenny's channel, Saturday night game night, and our Sunday daytime streams, daytime, our time. That depends on where you're at, I guess. We will be solely streaming from Shenny's. We're not going to do the starting on mine and then making everyone move over. It's just still a pain in the butt. So we're just going to do solo streams straight to Shenny's YouTube channel. It's no skin off my nose. It makes everything a heck of a lot easier. So when I'm dropping links from here on out, I'll be dropping links straight to her channel for our game nights and our Sunday hanging out. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
She's a curious canuck, always digging for the truth. Searching in the night, youthful heart and proof. With her shovel